Greetings, storysmiths and shapers of destiny. I am Ben, the Rookie DM, here in the Forge with you, shaping worlds, crafting chaos, and tempering our skills together. This week, we are going to talk about the very beginnings of the campaign and how I've sort of set up my first ever campaign with a brand new group of players, and we're going to talk a little bit about how it's going so far. Let's get into it. This is my first ever video on a brand new YouTube channel called RookieDM. I wanted to start this channel because I am new as a dungeon master, although not new as a player of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And being a dungeon master can feel really intimidating. And my goal and my purpose with this video series and with this channel is to help encourage you along your path as a dungeon master and showing you a little bit of my process along the way, things that I've done wrong, things that I did well, and the lessons that I learned along the way. What should you expect from this channel? Session recaps, DM insights, some things that I've done to prepare, changes in my process as I learn and grow along with you, my audience here, the world building tips and kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing, things that I try with my players, what works, what doesn't work, all of that. The whole purpose of this is to sort of document the journey. You know, there's many resources on YouTube that are awesome from DMs who've been doing this for a lot of years, and they offer a lot of great and valuable insight. But I haven't found a lot of YouTube content that is actually sort of walking you through a campaign from a dungeon master's perspective, and especially from a new dungeon master's perspective. And so I thought, you know, I could maybe provide some helpful insights in here, and provide a space for you to ask questions, share your thoughts and insights, and hopefully we can build a little community here together of young and aspiring DMs or just newer DMs who are, you know, creating great experiences for their players. I'll also give you some behind the screen reflections, campaign debriefs, tools of the trade, just anything that I can do to try and help you, and things that I've tried and maybe didn't work, or, you know, whatever it may be. You know, every DM's going to run things a little differently, and I think that's part of the beauty of being a DM. There's so many different ways to do it, and so I find it helpful to look at different DMs, what they do, what they try, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and then through the process of that you can find what works best for you, which is ultimately what matters, right? We want to find what works best for you and your style as a dungeon master. Like, for example, some dungeon masters don't really like having this DM screen. I personally do, because I like to keep dice rolls hidden sometimes, or I have minis back here that may be enemies that they encounter. And so I like, you know, at least for the setup that I have, which is basically, this is just my dining room. It's a dining room table. It's a big table. It's great, but there's not a whole lot of room to hide stuff. So this is how I hide things, so that I can, you know, pleasantly surprise my PCs. A little bit about me. My name's Ben. I'm in my 30s. I play Dungeons & Dragons for a number of years now. I started with 5e back, you know, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, and just fell in love with it. Really enjoy the experience of being a player, but I got spoiled very early on because my very first DM ran a homebrew campaign and did, you know, really great voices and just did a really great job. And I got spoiled. That was the bar that was set for me very early on, and I just thought that was normal. This is just how Dungeons & Dragons is played. I didn't know anything about modules or pre-written campaigns or one-shots, any of that. So I then moved away from that city, wasn't able to keep playing with that group anymore, and went to a number of game stores and played various campaigns and modules with different groups, and found myself really continuing to enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons, but missing kind of that homebrew element, in that sense that any choices that I made as a player could reflect in the world and influence the outcome of real events. And so I decided to run with some inspiration that I had and just make my own world and make my own campaign. And over the course of 2 or 3 years, I came up with what I am running now, which is still very unfinished, but has enough to sort of get the ball rolling. So I took on a very ambitious task as a first-time DM. You know, many people would advise, and rightly so, they would say, hey, you should probably go ahead and run some modules before you try and run something you made yourself, because, you know, they have balanced encounters and they're made by professionals who know what they're doing and this and that. Yeah, I ignored all of that advice because I'm very ambitious and decided that I wanted to just go full on homebrew campaign, homebrew world from the get-go. And I took literally over 2 years to build this thing because it was fun. I found it fun. And that's just what I wanted to do. I wanted to have more flexibility in setting the scene and the story. And I wanted to have an experience where my players could have characters who really belong to the world, where they have their own place in the world. They've already put their stamp on the world in some way with their backstory and the characters or the NPCs that they already know. And I felt like it would create a much better experience for the players. It creates more buy-in for them because, like, my character knows this NPC already, or has been to this city, or knows this about this town. And I actually, in the process of working through backstories with each player individually, allowed them to put their stamp on whatever little corner of the world that they happened to come from, as much as they felt inspired to do or wanted. And I found that it's been really rewarding because, like, for one, they actually helped me come up with things for the world. Like, I haven't fleshed out every detail by any means, but I also found that there's a lot more buy-in and interest from them. They want to know more about this world because they already feel like they're a part of it. So that extra work of letting them kind of craft and shape some of it, I feel like has been well worth it. And then the other reason why I wanted to run a homebrew campaign is I wanted to give my players that experience that I had as a first-time player, where I felt like my choices really mattered and I could actually shape the outcome of the story. And I felt that way because it was true. There were choices that we as players, we as a party made, that the DM later told us actually genuinely reshaped the story, and he ran with it. And that cooperative storytelling element is maybe my favorite part of Dungeons and Dragons, or just TTRPGs in general. And it's definitely more work to create that kind of back and forth between player and DM, but I really feel like it's worth it. If you can manage it, I think it's really, really worth it. So this is part of the goal that I have set, is I've intentionally left a number of things open-ended throughout the world, the NPCs, the story arcs of the campaign, because I want the players to shape the story. There's still some things that are going to happen in the world, major events or whatever, which we will get to over time, over the course of these videos. And they're going to happen no matter what the players do, realistically, because they're just part of the larger narrative. But those things are, you know, just part of it. And then there's a whole nother massive amount of the world and of the story that they get to shape how it unfolds. So that's how I view the sort of collaborative storytelling element, and I love it. I love it. So before, at the risk of getting too rambly, let's move on to the world of Avarion, or Avarion. I'm still like deciding how I want to pronounce that. Avarion. So I'm going to give you some bare minimum context of what I gave the players prior to session 1 and how I set them up. They knew a little bit more about the world than what I'm going to give you today, because it was necessary for helping them create their backstories. But I'd rather than just give you a lore dump and you don't know me, and I think it's best to just go ahead and give right into the story. So our story begins on the continent of Bessar. It's a land of magic and high fantasy and plenty of history. Our journey starts in the city of Satis. It is a coastal metropolis that is capital to the Satesian Republic. It is a massive center for trade, tourism, debauchery, corruption, wealth, all of the above. I kind of, behind the screen here, I think of it almost as kind of like Las Vegas on the beach in a way, but with more of an economic trade element because it is a coastal metropolis. I told the players that they were going to be starting on a ship called Melora's Grace. It is a combination of a transport and recreation vessel, so there are a number of reasons why they and any of the other passengers may be aboard the ship. It could be because they are a stowaway fleeing from someone and they just want to get away from Satis, and it was just the fastest and the easiest route. Maybe they're being chased by the docks and just hopped on a random ship as a stowaway. They could have been following someone. This ship could be carrying a number of VIPs, people who are traveling to Kuwari Island, which is about a 5-day journey sailing off northeast of Satis. And there's any number of reasons why people go to and from Kuwari Island, whether it be for trade, whether it be for shady backdoor dealings, illicit activity. Kuwari Island is sort of independent, city-state sort of situation, self-governed, lots of piracy and corruption. It's not a pirate island or a pirate town. Narun is the town. Not a pirate island, but there is piracy, if that makes sense. And the ship sailed a couple of days, and then one fateful night, there is a sudden storm and a explosion of mysterious origin. And that is where we pick up with session 1. And I did this very intentionally because I wanted to start the campaign. The fancy Latin term is in media res, which basically just means in the middle of the action. I wanted to start in the middle of the action, and I wanted to, rather than do the classic, you meet in a tavern, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that is a trope for a reason because it does work. But I wanted to give the party, the players, a reason for their characters to connect. Because the idea of, you guys are going to just randomly meet in a bar and start an adventuring party, to me, doesn't feel that believable. I think you need, in my opinion, I wanted to have some kind of big event that brings these strangers together in a narrative sense, and where they are fighting for survival in a way on their own, and developing bonds that way. I think of like the military. Many former military members report feeling a sense of camaraderie from fighting alongside one another. And, obviously this is a D&D campaign, right? It's not remotely the same, but I do think there's an element of like, when you are stuck with a group of people and you have to fight alongside each other to survive or you die, there's an element of bonding that takes place that's much stronger than just meeting by happenstance and then maybe having like one little skirmish break outside the bar, or however, whatever hook you might present. So I wanted a really strong hook. So my party, we started at level 1. We are using D&D 5e 2024 rules. We decided to use the 2024 rules because we have, of the 6 players that I have, there are 3 new players who had never played D&D before, and the other 3 had played the 5e 2014 rules. And so in discussion with the players, we collectively decided to go ahead and switch to the 2024 rules. There's some things that I like about the 2024 rules. There's some things that I don't love. but ultimately I thought, you know, if you guys are brand new to D&D and you've never played before, might as well learn the most current rule set. And because then, you know, we're using D&D Beyond for our character sheets. I have a campaign account or whatever they call it on D&D Beyond, so I can share resources with them. And I didn't want to deal with the hassle of trying to sort through like legacy versus non-legacy material, which I'm still having to do a little bit of, but that's a whole nother thing. So just for the sake of simplicity and teaching new players the most current rules, I just felt like that was, we collectively sort of decided to go that route. As for house rules, we do have a couple. Actually, there's really only one house rule that I can recall, which is for ability checks. I have decided, and I believe for saving throws, I have to double check it off the top of my head. I've decided that a natural 20 is not an automatic success. What it does is it gives you a +3 on top of any bonuses that you may otherwise have. So it is still possible to fail a saving throw or ability check with a natural 20. Now, when it comes to attack rolls, natural 20 still crits. But I wanted the natural 20 to feel still special, but not an automatic success, because I think, like, realistically in a high fantasy setting, it's a kind of a funny word to use, but realistically, if you are trying to do something that you're not very good at, even if you are very lucky and do the best that you could possibly do, which is what a natural 20 is, right? It's the best that you can possibly do. You still might not be good enough if it's a really hard thing to do. And I think that balancing that out just made a lot of sense to me, and it's something I talked about with the players and they all agreed. So here's how this plays out. Let's say you have a -2 to perception. And let's say you're trying to perceive someone who rolled a 25 stealth check. If you roll natural 20, you get a +3, but you have a -2. So your total now is 21, which most of the time would be a success for most checks. You know, DC 21 is a pretty high DC. But in this particular case, your foe still manages to out-sneak you, even with a 20. However, if you have a +2, now that 20 plus the +2 would have been a 22, but now it's a 25. And now you do succeed because of that +3 bonus to your natural 20. So that was it's sort of a homebrew rule that I came up with, and I've tested it with 2 different groups now, and it has worked really, really well. So that is something that you might want to try in your own campaign. I think it's kind of a cool thing. The other thing that we have decided is that if you take a health potion as an action, you can regain the full HP that the potion allows. So if it's 2d4 + 2, you get 10 hit points using an action. If you decide to use a bonus action, so that, you know, think about a combat situation, you want to use your action to attack, bonus action to heal. Now you have to roll the dice, and you will, you know, probably get less than the full amount. I decided that this was kind of I kind of liked this rule, because most of the time when you're using potions, it's going to be in a combat scenario, and I like giving the players the choice of how much of your action economy do you want to use up to heal versus for other things. And sacrificing a whole action in order to take the full healing, for most classes, most of the time, is going to more or less end your turn. You know, depending on the class, you'll have some bonus actions that you can do that could still be helpful. Maybe you can cast Healing Word, or do something, or, you know, Bardic Inspiration or something like that. But, you know, it's still sacrificing a large portion of your turn, but the reward is you get more HP. So I kind of like that role. We've been playing around with it, and the players seem to be really responsive to it, and I'm totally fine with it as a DM. I mean, you know, it's, like I said, it's a balance, it's a trade-off, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Very briefly, before we wrap this up, I've, you know, call myself the Rookie DM, but I also mentioned 2 groups, so I want to clarify that so that it's not confusing to you. I'm calling myself Rookie DM because I've not run a full campaign. I have run, with the old group, I ran a total of 9 sessions for this campaign. Well, really like 8.5, because we had session 0, session 1 kind of combined together. So I want to tell you just a little bit about how that campaign went, and I'll reference it a little bit for the short-term future as we get along here. So I had a group that I was playing with, and I had played under another DM with largely the same group for a while. And then that DM had some life stuff come up and decided to step away, and I volunteered to replace because I had this whole thing ready and everyone seemed interested. So I was like, hey, I'll give this a shot. I've never done this before, but I'll give it a shot. I think I can do it. And so I did, and it went pretty well. You know, there's definitely some learning curves. I definitely prepared a lot more ahead of time than I really needed to, but I kind of did that because I knew that I did not know how long each session would take or how much of my notes we would get through. And even running the second campaign, I've noticed that the pace of the group is very different from the second group is very different from the first group. And so I would really encourage you as a TM, like, have more ready than you think you'll need, maybe a lot more, because you have no idea. You have no idea how fast they're going to go through what you've set for them. How much time are they going to spend RPing? I mean, if you've played with this group of people before, you may have a better idea. But if it's a new group of players like I've had, especially this time around, you really want to have more ready than you think you'll need, because the last thing you want to do is end the session an hour early because you ran out of notes. So that was how it went. And one thing that was interesting too is the group was like not particularly cautious. So, you know, walking through a cave system or whatever, they just like went through it. They didn't try to stealth or nothing. They just like, boo, we're going through this. It's like, okay, cool. Which meant that they went through a lot of the early stuff that I prepared a lot faster than I had anticipated. And I was really glad that I had, you know, in my head, I had like 4 or 5 sessions worth of stuff prepared, and it ended up only taking like 2 or 3. So I was really glad that I had as much prepared as I did. It helped me as a DM, like, not panic. The other thing I've learned is that, and you will hear a lot of other people say this, the CR system doesn't mean anything. It's kind of useless. I have found that, like, if I'm using D&D Beyond's encounter balance system, encounter creator, I have to make a combat deadly most of the time for it to be challenging at all. And I've also homebrew monsters a bit. Like, I'll take existing monsters and add to them. So for example, for session 0, I had a goblin encounter set up so as soon as they created their characters, we got the character sheets ready, rolled HP, all that, I got them into a goblin encounter. You know, it was a very simple, like, roadside, you come across a camp that looks abandoned, but there's signs of a scuffle, and then goblins come out and try to ambush them, essentially. You know, very minimal narrative element. It was really just to test combat, and part of it was for me as a new DM. That was literally the first combat I had ever run, was session 0. And so it was partially for me just to learn the ropes a little bit and figure out how I wanted to keep track of initiative and all of that, and also getting a feel for my party's class makeup and encounter balance. So we went through that, and I kind of realized, I was like, okay, if I slightly outnumber the PCs with weaker enemies, it ends up being like a medium to tough difficulty, but not necessarily deadly. And what I did with that goblin encounter is I had one head goblin who is like a very low level mage of sorts, had a staff that could cast firebolt, cantrip, super easy. And then as a bonus action could rally his minions, as they were, or the other goblins, to focus their attack on one particular PC, and if they attacked that PC, they got advantage for the round. And that made the fight a lot more interesting, because then, you know, once a player hears the goblin call out their player as the one to attack, there's a look of fear in their eyes that is just, as a DM, is it's kind of fun, especially when it's session 0 and there's no consequences, right? Like, there's no dying in session 0. It's just practice. But I found that You know, I took some of that advice from Matt Colville, whose videos I highly recommend. He has some great, you know, running the game videos. But I've had a lot of fun modifying and tweaking monsters a little bit just to make them a little bit tougher and a little bit more difficult. Now, the 2024 rules have beefed up some monsters a little bit to sort of counterbalance the way that they've beefed up some of the characters. So I'm still kind of figuring out how all that works with the 2024 rules, but the first time I ran the first 8 or 9 sessions of this campaign, it was with the 2014 rules. It was right before the 24 rules came out. And then we went through that. We went through, like I said, 8 or 9 sessions before I had to step away because I had a family member who was sick for a while and just needed a lot of help. So unfortunately, I had to step away from that group. But now we're here. And I'm no longer playing in a game store, which was awesome of them to host us, but it was noisy and had fluorescent lighting and wasn't really the best, most ideal setup. And now, you know, I'm really fortunate to be able to play in a dining room where I get to control music, lighting to an extent, and other fun things like that. So anyways, if you stuck with me through this whole kind of rambling first video, you're a trooper. I appreciate it. I would love to hear from you what you think about all of this. This is just super fun for me. I freaking love D&D. I love making these worlds and these characters and crafting these stories with the players. And I found that the players just love having the sense of the choices that I make matter. My character has a real place in the world. And I've told them, like, this is a living, breathing world. You are going to shape the story, and it's also going to move on with or without you at the same time. So I find that balance really exciting and fun. So if you're a rookie DM like me, like I said, in total now between the 2 campaigns, I've run 12 sessions, I think, or really like 11 and a half, you know, with the session series, but we'll just call it 12 sessions total. So still very, very, very new to being a DM, but I'm having a great time and learning, and I hope you will have fun with it too and run a game where you are. I think there's more demand for this type of thing, for TTRPGs, for playing Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or whatever your game system of choice may be. I think there's more demand than ever. Like I said, I have a group of 6 together. I put a couple of posts on like a Discord channel that I found for my local Denver area and got more response within a week. I had probably 9 or 10 inquiries. I had to turn people away, and I'm still getting some inquiries from that post months later. So there's so much demand. I could probably run D&D nights every night of the week, every week, if I really wanted to. I don't. It's a lot of work. But I'm just saying, like, if you have an inkling or an itch to DM and run a game, do it. There's so many people who would love to join your table and join me along this journey as we learn how to create awesome stories, craft incredible worlds, and create meaningful experiences for our players and for ourselves together. In the next video, I want to introduce you a little bit to the campaign itself, give you a brief outline of what we did at the very start of the campaign, and talk a little bit about the old campaign as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.